does view all rape as serious?
Well, he's gone some way to making rectitude for the mistakes and the comments that he's made, but I don't think that's really the issue. The issue is that to make a distinction, for the Justice Secretary to seek to make a distinction between different kinds of rape is very unhelpful. There's still a long way to go until women feel confident reporting rape and until we see the prosecutions that we need to see in order so those women get justice.
The power play behind Labour's deputy leadership race. Right. Before we get into the absolute storm brewing in Westminster, if you're not already subscribed to UK Connors, what exactly are you playing at? Hit that button now because trust me, you'll want to be here for what's coming next. This channel is your front row seat to the machinations, the power plays, and the political theatre that actually matters. Subscribe, because the next few months are going to be absolutely extraordinary. Now then, let's talk about power. Real power. Not the performative nonsense we see at Prime Minister's questions, but the kind that actually shapes this country. Keir Starmer might be sitting in number 10, but make no mistake, the battle for the soul of Labour is happening right beneath his feet, and it's getting rather interesting. The deputy leadership race isn't just some administrative reshuffle. It's a full-blown referendum on what Labour stands for, who it represents, and where it's heading. And this week, Bridget Phillipson just secured what might be the most crucial endorsement of her political career. 2 names, Unison and GMB. If those don't make your political antennae twitch, you haven't been paying attention. These aren't just any trade unions. These are the heavy hitters, the kingmakers, the organizations that represent hundreds of thousands of workers across this country. And they've just thrown their considerable weight behind the Education Secretary. This is a political equivalent of getting both Manchester clubs to agree on something. It simply doesn't happen unless something significant is in play. Let's dissect this properly, shall we? Unison, Britain's largest trade union with over 1 million members across public services, has made its choice. Linda Hobson, the chairwoman of Unison's Labour Link Committee, didn't mince her words. She called Phillipson strong, persuasive, and passionate. But here's the really telling bit. She said Phillipson has a clear understanding of unions and will be a powerful voice for their members working across public services. That's not just an endorsement, that's a declaration of trust. In a Labour Party that's been desperately trying to rebuild its relationship with organised labour after years of tension, that matters enormously. And then there's GMB. Gary Smith, their General Secretary, went even further. He emphasised that Phillipson has been a GMB member for 20 years. 20 years. That's not someone who joined a union for the optics last Tuesday. That's someone who's been in the trenches, who understands a movement from the inside. Smith represents over 100,000 school support staff, the teaching assistants, the administrators, the people who keep our education system functioning, but who've been criminally undervalued for decades. His backing isn't symbolic, it's strategic. Labour pledged to reinstate the school support staff negotiating body, and GMB wants someone at the top table who will actually deliver it. But let's zoom out for a moment because this isn't happening in a vacuum. Starmer's government is walking an absolute tightrope. They swept into power promising change, competence, and a government that works for working people. Yet the economic headwinds are brutal. The public sector is crying out for investment, and the trade unions are watching like hawks to see if Labour will actually follow through. The deputy leadership isn't just about who stands in when the Prime Minister is away. It's about who shapes policy, who influences direction, and crucially, who maintains a link between the parliamentary party and the movement that built it. Phillipson's pitch is rather clever when you examine it closely. She's positioning herself as a unity candidate, someone who can bridge the various factions within Labour. She says her campaign is getting support from every part of the movement. That's a direct play for both the traditional left who want to see strong union representation and the modernizers who want electoral credibility. It's a balancing act that would make a Cirque du Soleil performer nervous, but if she can pull it off, she becomes indispensable. Now, here's where it gets properly fascinating. The Education Secretary role she currently holds is no accident in this narrative. Education is absolutely central to Labour's pitch to the country. It's where aspiration meets equality, where opportunity is either created or crushed. If you control the education brief and you have the backing of the unions representing education workers, you're not just influential, you're essential. Phillipson isn't just collecting endorsements. She's building an empire of credibility across one of the most critical policy areas in British politics. But let's not be naive about what's actually happening here. This is a power play wrapped in the language of unity. Every leadership contest, and make no mistake that's what this is, involves calculation, ambition, and strategic positioning. Phillipson saying she'll be a deputy leader for every part of the country at cabinet is lovely rhetoric, but the subtext is clear. She's signaling that she understands power, she knows where it comes from in the Labour Party, and she's built the alliances to wield it effectively. The timing of these endorsements is particularly telling. They came after meetings of union leaders on Thursday, which means there were discussions, negotiations, perhaps even commitments made behind closed doors. This is how politics actually works. The public sees the announcement, the smiling photographs, the supportive quotes. What they don't see are the conversations about policy priorities, about access, about influence. When Unison and GMB back a candidate, they are not doing it out of the goodness of their hearts. They are doing it because they believe that candidate will deliver for their members. And this brings us to a rather uncomfortable truth about British politics that nobody really wants to discuss openly. The relationship between Labour and the trade unions has always been transactional. The unions provide money, organizational muscle, and votes at conference. In return, they expect influence over policy and a voice at the highest levels of the party. It's not corruption. It's a fundamental DNA of how Labour was created and how it functions. The question isn't whether this relationship exists. It's whether it produces good governance. Phillipson's opponents in this race, and yes, there are opponents even if the establishment wants to present her as the inevitable choice, will be watching these endorsements with considerable concern. Union backing matters in Labour leadership contests. It provides legitimacy, resources, and the appearance of being connected to Labour's roots. Without it, you're basically running on fumes and hoping the membership feels rebellious. History suggests they rarely do when the unions have made their preferences clear. There's also the Starmer dimension to consider. The Prime Minister isn't publicly backing anyone. Of course, that would be unseemly. But you can bet that Downing Street has views on who they want in the deputy role. Starmer needs someone who can manage the party, who can keep the unions on side without making commitments that box in the government, and who can be a public face of Labour when needed. Phillipson ticks those boxes rather neatly. She's competent, she's media-trained, and she's just proven she can secure the backing of Labour's most important institutional partners. But here's the twist that makes this absolutely compelling. What if the unions have backed the wrong horse? What if Phillipson, once in position, decides that governing means making choices that don't always align with union priorities? We've seen this pattern before in Labour history. Politicians court union support, get elected to positions of power, and then discover that the demands of government and the demands of organized Labour don't always coincide. The public sector wants pay rises. The Treasury says there's no money. The unions want nationalization. The economists say it's unaffordable. The movement wants radical change. The polling says the public wants competence and stability. This is the impossible position that every Labour deputy leader finds themselves in. You're supposed to be the bridge between the parliamentary party and the broader movement, but sometimes those two sides want completely different things. Phillipson is walking into this with her eyes open, presumably, but having the backing of Unison and GMB means she'll be expected to deliver. And if she doesn't, if she's seen as having sold out or gone native in Westminster, the backlash will be severe. There's also the question of what this means for the future of the Labour Party itself. Are we watching the consolidation of a new Labour establishment, one that's learned from the chaos of recent years and is building durable power structures? Or are we seeing the same old patterns reassert themselves, where union influence and parliamentary ambition create tensions that eventually tear the party apart? The optimist will say Phillipson represents a new generation of Labour politicians who can navigate these complexities. The cynics will say it's the same old game with slightly different players. And let's talk about the message this sends to the country. The general public, the voters who actually decide elections, are watching this too. When they see trade unions backing candidates for leadership positions, what do they think? Some see it as democracy in action, as working people having a voice in political decision-making. Others see it as special interests wielding disproportionate influence. Labour's eternal challenge is convincing voters that union involvement is a former and not the latter. Phillipson's success or failure in this race will partly depend on whether she can articulate why union backing makes her a better deputy leader for everyone, not just for union members. The Education Secretary's response to these endorsements was pitch perfect from a political communication standpoint. She called it humbling. She emphasized her 20-year GMB membership. She talked about being a deputy leader for every part of the country. These aren't accidental phrases. They're carefully calibrated to send specific messages to specific audiences. To the unions, you're one of us. To the parliamentary party, I can unite us. To the public, I represent the whole country. Whether anyone actually believes all of that simultaneously is another question entirely. What's particularly intriguing is how this plays into broader narratives about who gets the lead in British politics. Phillipson is positioning herself as someone who understands working people because she's been part of the union movement for 2 decades. That's a powerful story in a Labour Party that's sometimes accused of being led by people who've never had a proper job outside politics. It's authenticity as political currency, and in our current moment, authenticity is worth its weight in gold even if it's somewhat performed. But authenticity cuts both ways. If you present yourself as a candidate of the unions, of working people, of the Labour movement, you're setting expectations. Those expectations become standards against which you'll be judged. Every policy decision, every compromise, every moment when governing requires choosing the pragmatic over the principled becomes a test of whether you're still that person or whether power has changed you. British political history is littered with politicians who fail that test. The GMB's emphasis on the school support staff negotiating body is particularly revealing about what unions actually want from these relationships. It's not abstract solidarity, it's concrete policy commitments that improve members' lives. Reinstating that negotiating body means better pay, better conditions, and better recognition for over 100,000 workers. That's what union backing is supposed to produce. If Phillipson becomes deputy leader and that body isn't reinstated, or if it's a watered-down version that doesn't deliver real change, the political capital she's just earned will evaporate rather quickly. There's also something rather fascinating about the language everyone's using. Strong, persuasive, passionate, powerful voice. These are all words about communication, about advocacy, about being heard. They are not primarily about policy expertise or administrative competence. The deputy leadership, in this framing, is about being a voice, about telling Labour's story, about persuasion. That tells you something important about what the role has become in modern British politics. It's not really about governing, it's about narrative control and coalition management. And narrative control matters now more than ever. Labour is in government but facing a skeptical public, a hostile media landscape, and internal divisions that haven't disappeared just because they won an election. Whoever becomes deputy leader needs to be able to go on television, face hostile questioning, and articulate why Labour's choices are the right ones even when they are difficult or unpopular. Phillipson's proven she can do that in the education brief, but the deputy leadership is a different beast entirely. Every issue becomes your issue. Every government failure becomes something you have to defend. So where does this leave us? Bridget Phillipson has secured the backing of 2 of Britain's most influential trade unions in her bid to become Labour's deputy leader. That's enormously significant and probably makes her the front runner if she wasn't already. But it also binds her to expectations and commitments that will shape her time in the role if she wins. The unions haven't backed her out of sentiment. They backed her because they believe she'll deliver for their members and maintain their influence within the party. The broader question is what kind of Labour Party emerges from this process. One that's comfortable with trade union influence and sees it as a strength, or one that's constantly anxious about being seen as beholden to special interests. One that can balance the demands of governing with the ideals of the movement, or one that ends up satisfying nobody because it's trying to please everyone. These aren't abstract questions. They'll determine whether Labour gets a second term or whether this government becomes another brief interruption in Conservative dominance. This deputy leadership race matters because it's a fight over Labour's identity at a crucial moment. The party is in power but not yet secure. It has made promises but not yet delivered on them. It has a union support but hasn't yet proven it deserves it. Phillipson's candidacy, backed by Unison and GMB, represents one answer to what Labour should be. Whether it's the right answer, well, we're about to find out. The British political landscape is shifting constantly. Power is being consolidated and challenged in equal measure, and the decisions made in the next few months will echo for years. This is exactly why you need to stay plugged into UK Connors. We're not here for the surface-level nonsense. We're here for the real story, the power plays, the strategic calculations that actually determine how this country is run. Subscribe if you haven't already, because what's coming next is going to be absolutely unmissable. The game is afoot, and we'll be watching every single move.